Blitzscaling podcast. I'm Julian Newman, and I'm joined by Edrizio de la Cruz. Did I get that right?
Perfectly, bud.
I'm supposed to check, like if you're a good podcast host, you check before the streaming. But
yeah, no worries. I know I have a hard name.
And I actually, your first name, I asked some people who were from Latin America how to pronounce it.
Yeah, it's Edrizios. Actually, it's Brazilian, so it's a little bit unique outside of Brazil. But it's Edrizio.
And right, so Edrizio, you're I really can't pronounce it with your perfect accent, but you are formerly a founder. Your business is sold to MasterCard, which I think is your kind of like claim to fame, and is amazing. And now you're a visiting partner at Y-Combinator. And we're really lucky to have you here. Obviously, it's rare to meet people with your level of success. So thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me. Excited to share some stories with you and hopefully add some value to your audience. So excited to dig in and share some war stories.
So we have questions piling in. I think we already have 10 before now. We just have 2 more that popped into the chat. So everyone who's listening, please add your questions to the chat and I will ask them throughout this live stream. It seems like this is going to be an audience question heavy live stream. You're very popular, Edrizio. But let's start, like, where did you grow up? And let's just, what were you like, in the first early years of your life?
Yeah, so I grew up in the Dominican Republic. I always tell people my first endeavor into entrepreneurship was selling guavas in front of my house. Age 11, I immigrated from my neighborhood in Santo Domingo to the South Bronx and then Harlem. Had to grow up very quickly. Back then, I got to witness everything from assault, gang violence, police brutality. I lost my best friend to gang rivalry, all before the time I was 18 years old. At that time, I had to make a choice. Do I want to be a victim in life, or do I want to be a victor in life? And I didn't have many doors open for me, so I wound up applying to college, getting into college, and getting into the Air Force. I wanted to become a fighter pilot. Part of me just wanted to escape, but that didn't work because my parents needed me to help against me. So I wound up dropping out of both and became an aircraft mechanic, if you can believe that, at JFK Airport. I wound up doing that for the next 6 years. I worked nights and weekends as an aircraft mechanic. Age 22, came back to college at age 22. Went to community college. I decided that I wanted to kind of level up. I could do more, but if I was going to go back to college, I wanted the best career possible. So at that time, it was about investment banking, Wall Street.
Right.
But no bank wanted to take a chance on this Dominican kid with a thick accent that's older than everybody else. So I got rejected time and time again. Got rejected by 11 banks 33 times, so 33 rejections in a row. But I wound up getting one opportunity for an internship at UBS. I took it, and that completely changed my life because I went from being a blue collar worker, wearing coveralls every day, coming home spending like jet fuel, to wearing a Brooks Brothers suit and having my own secretary, which is just a complete 180. It opened up a brand new world for me. And I did feel a lot of imposter syndrome, but that was the first sign that I was in the right room because I was around people that were smarter than me. Then parlay that into a full-time offer at JP Morgan, where I became a full-time investment banker. And then I saw a lot of my friends were from Ivy League schools. And I went to a city college and community college, and I wanted to be part of that environment as well. So I applied to business school, but a business school requires you to have a GMAT, which is like the SAT. And typically you got to get around 750 to get into a top tier school like a Harvard or Wharton. I wound up getting a 570, and I topped out of that. And I tried again, and I couldn't get anything above that. It was extremely frustrating, but I decided, hey, I'm going to apply. I'm going to apply with my best foot forward and apply with my story. I'm not going to be dwindled down to a number. I apply, and I got in. And I was so confident when I got into Wharton that it kind of helped me propel and, launch a startup, which became, Regality, became Arcus, and then wound up obviously succeeding and, going through the ebbs and flows of a decade-long journey, but ultimately selling to MasterCard.
I want to just pop some of these comments up on the screen. So here, Emmanuel Ben, thank you, Emmanuel, says hello. So I guess hello to Emmanuel. And we have Annika. I'm so used to using AirPods, so I just hit my anyways. So Annika says, this is such a cool event, so I definitely agree. And here, you may have a reaction to this. Larry Velez says, the Bronx is a generator of great things. Do you agree, Edrizio?
Yeah, I mean, I was there in '81, so very different ecosystem. I mean, I was in the South Bronx, like I was surrounded by abandoned buildings, and literally at the epicenter of the cocaine epidemic. So I got to see one side of the Bronx, probably not the best side, but I think it definitely, if you can make it out of there, you can make it anywhere.
The South Bronx is where hip hop was invented, I think.
That's right. Boogie Down Bronx, big pun.
Yeah,
man. I remember those days. It was great being in New York and around those years, because I got to see like hip hop emerge. I'm a huge hip hop head as a result of that. So,
how much do you feel just like growing up in the New York area kind of like contributed to your your success or maybe ambition? Like how much had kind of like being close to that move the needle for you and kind of like change your life?
A lot. So I think even growing up in a Dominican barrio, I think in transition from there to Harlem and South Bronx, I had to grow up very quickly. I saw a lot, from the age 11 to 17, as I mentioned before. I got to witness like real life very early. My best friend joined, the Lion Kings, and he got shot in the head twice by the time I was 16. And you see that by the time you're 17, it's like you see a lot of things very quickly, and what there's two choices there. You can either, like I said before, you can be a victim or a victim. You can you can retaliate and empower yourself, or you can crumble and become a victim. And it took a while for that engine to kind of develop a morph. But that became my fuel, and I think that's what drove me and allowed me to travel the ebbs and flows of the startup journey. That it is full of more downs than ups, and it just gave me kind of an advantage to everybody else that hadn't experienced that. So I'm thankful for that. It was rough, but I'm thankful for having those experiences early on. It gave me the grit that I needed to do what I did at Arcus.
Annika has followed up and says, definitely posting a summary of what I learned here from Twitter. So thank you, Annika. You're very popular. Honestly, we don't usually get this much engagement on our streams. So I think it's some of your personal magic.
No, not at all. I'm just here to share the few things I've learned along the way, and
so you were
a lot of success. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you were at Wharton. You started your business kind of out of Wharton, and tell us a little bit more about that experience. Like, it sounds like you started with one sort of type of business, and then you kind of pivoted a little bit or adjusted it.
Sure. So so I'll talk about two things. I think about like launching a business out of business school. and then pivots. So I graduated from Wharton, and I think the reason why it was a great launching pad for myself, it was because I think it gave me a psychological safety net. I felt like I didn't have an economic safety net. I was actually like swimming in debt up until we sold the company. I had like a negative net worth, but because of the student debt I had. But I felt confident that I just graduated from the #1 business school in the world. If I can do that, even if I fail in a year or two, I can just go back and rely on that. So I think that's the power of attending a really good school, especially for folks of color that don't have other access. Some folks grow up with access. Their parents come from affluence. If you don't come from that, and you get an opportunity to attend a top business school or or work at a top firm, that's kind of your bedrock, and it brings you a psychological safety net. We as far as Pivot is concerned, we started with a concept called Regali. Regali was a remittance company. That's a B2C remittance company. I'm an immigrant, so I grew up receiving remittances. And when I became an immigrant, I grew up sending remittances. And the whole notion was, how can we change remittances? Instead of sending cash, can you pay your family's bills abroad? So if I'm here, can I pay my family's electricity, gas, water, student loans from abroad? And that concept got us into Y-Combinator. We became the first Latino company to go into Y-Combinator. I wound up raising a $3 million seed round from a number of great folks, like Andreessen Horowitz, Kapor Capital, Winklevoss Capital, Initialized Capital. I was pretty lucky to have such great investors. I was so lucky that I got let it go to my own head. So a year later, that business completely failed. There was no growth, no traction, no retention. I had hired a bunch of people, which I didn't need to. I'd done a bunch of marketing, which was overblown. I wound up slicing the company in half, wound up letting go half the staff, including my own brother, and starting all over again. And that was the beginning of what I call the Trough of Sorrow, which was invented by Paul Graham, which depicts the journey of when you go really high at the beginning and then you crash down. But you stay there, and we stay there for about 6 to 7 years, just kind of doing all these things, going, taking one step back, 2 steps forward, and back and forth, up until we were able to grow the company and scale it post-pandemic quite sizably.
And you, through the whole period, you were with the same co-founders, is that right?
Yeah, up until the pandemic, we had an unfortunate breakup with one of our co-founders. I was actually going to step down. I was going to get fired. I was going to fire as a CEO, and I temporarily said yes, like, you can fire me, but let me stay to raise the round, the Series B. I wound up staying to raise the Series B, which was led by SoftBank and Citibank, and in parallel to that, we started conversing with the strategics, and those conversations led to what became the sale to MasterCard.
So let me pull up some of these questions that we have piling in, because some of them refer to what you were saying. So here, Joseph Gede. So thank you, Joseph, for this question. And the question is, how were you able to change your mindset from a jet mechanic to a banker?
That's a great question. Thank you for that, Joseph. So I think to me, it was less about being a mechanic and less about being a banker. It was more about like what I wanted in life. Mind you, I was 25 already, which is not a young age at all to decide what you're going to do. It's actually older than most people. So that was an advantage to me. And what I knew is that I just wanted to get the most out of life. That's all. At that age, I just wanted to get the most out of life. And I felt like my parents had made such sacrifices. I had lost a lot of things. I lost my best friend. I experienced a lot at that point in time already. And I wanted to have an opportunity to have access to the best life possible. And I knew then and there that being an aircraft mechanic wasn't going to do that. And being a banker was just going to open up more doors. And lo and behold, and I was right. I just felt like, life is like a video game. It's all about like levels. And like sometimes you don't even know how many levels there are until you get to the next level. But in the back of my mind, I knew I needed to get out of this level. Like this level like wasn't for me. Like I've been doing it for 6 years. Everybody that I work with is super complacent. Nobody wants more than just work 8 hours a day and just have a house. And I was like I don't know, like that wasn't me. I knew I wanted more. And I needed to put myself in the right room. And I knew I was in the wrong room, because you're in the wrong room where everybody else is kind of looking up to you. You're in the right room when you're scared that everybody's smiling at you. And I was right about that. I've been wrong a lot about things, but I was right about that. So, and that just became kind of my success hack, just putting myself in the right room where I'm the dumbest person there. And if ever I find myself surrounded by people that are, they're looking up to me, I know I'm in the wrong place. So I need to get out of that as soon as possible.
How did you, I'm curious about this. Like, what do you think is kind of like the personality trait that enabled you to see, the world for what it was at that time, right? So like realize like, hey, maybe this isn't the optimal, like what I thought was a path forward and what everyone else thinks is a path forward actually isn't. Like, what was it being like more contrarian, more competitive? Like, what is it about you that made you be able to like see that truth while others didn't?
I say this joke is like, I had a PhD at a very early age. I was poor, hungry, and desperate. And I felt like I was so desperate. Felt like I had this hunger, this like desire to just get the F out. Like I knew that there's something. Like I used to watch a lot of Bloomberg TV, and I used to just daydream, man, of like being on the other side. And not because I like Wall Street per se or like deal making. I just felt like I looked at Wall Street and I was like, that's success. Like the ability to make decisions, to look good and feel good and be part of something greater than yourself. And I knew that I could be a part of that. So I think I was so hungry and so determined that I was just not gonna let anything stop me, no matter what people told me. I was just maniacal about my determination. Even I remember when I got interviewed at UBS, I remember I was gonna graduate in like 2 months, and if I didn't get an internship, I would just graduate without a job. So I remember I got an interview, and the interview was for a Monday, and I got the interview on Friday, and I just parked myself at the library for like 48 hours. I read every Wall Street Journal article you could. I read every book on banking you could. I showed up to the banking interview. I freaking aced it. Got the job right away, same day. So I was pretty. I was just so like I was just gonna like. There's nothing that can stop me. It was like, to me, it was like, I've already won. You just gotta wait for it to manifest itself. And when you have that mentality, like it's just like almost the world and the universe wants to like go with you almost. Like everything else just becomes a test for the ultimate action, which is your success. And that's what I've gotten a chance to work with now. A lot of people who've succeeded massively and become billionaires, and that kind of manifest destiny mindset is something that I've seen a lot in common. That conqueror mindset, like
kind of like an irrational sense of self-importance, but like in a good way, right? It's like, I am special, and you're just convinced of that, and like in a way that's not necessarily based on facts, but just that belief, manifests itself in the world or something like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. A lot of this game is you have to be maniacal about, almost obsessed about success. You have to be delusional about your own belief and your own conviction in yourself, your ability to execute. And that becomes magnetic, right? As a founder, you're a magnet of resources. You need to attract resources like venture capital, engineers, press, customers, and one begets the other. So venture capitalists want to invest in people who are highly confident, have deep conviction in their ideas, have great belief in themselves, because they know that your belief will act as a capital multiplier, right? I can invest seed capital into this founder, and they're going to go and 10x that capital. So I think those things are things that most investors look for, and that's one thing I talk to founders that they need to build in themselves very early.
And team members too, right? Like investors. I mean, investors are team members, but
Yes.
employees. Everybody. Just when you're convinced that you are going to win, that's just better than when you're convinced you're going to lose.
Yeah, you have to have the conviction, especially and throughout the journey. Like at the very early, when you're like just 4 or 5 people, and at the very in the mid stages when you're 100+ people, it's just that you always need to lead from the front. People are always looking to you for decisions. When we were at our B stage and we were 100+ employees and we had to lay people off because of the pandemic, and people always looking to you, how you react.
Yeah.
What are you gonna say? Is this what's gonna break him? This is it? But when things get tough, and and the pressure's on and the lights are on, that's when you have an opportunity to really shine. And I think I thank my upbringing for training me to do that. I didn't go to prep school. I don't have parents that are engineers or went to or are founders or anything like that. But I had the life that I lead, and that trained me to be tough and have a high degree of grit and not quit.
So I'm going to pull up a couple of other questions, but first I'll tell people, obviously we get a ton of questions when we do these streams, and we prioritize the questions from our Patreon. So if you want to sign up, it's blitzscaling, patreon.com/blitzscaling. And, you get to ask questions, priority questions. You actually help me with my prep for interviews and for talking to Chris. And then also, we do quarterly community check-ins with the blitzscaling community, which includes, me, Chris, and, everyone on our Patreon. So I will pull up this next question. So, Edrizio, the question is, sorry, I keep on hitting my earphones. So anyway, the question is, many founders who drop out of Stanford do so with zero student debt, a place to live, and parents to support them. What advice do you have to entrepreneurs from places like the Bronx and Harlem who don't have this safety net?
Yeah, so thank you for asking that question. I am so passionate about answering that question that I wound up writing a book that answers that question. It's called The Underdog Founder. It comes out on September 19th. I'll share the link so you can get an early copy later. So I think that's been my entire life. How to win as an underdog, and how to the mindset that I've always had is how not to win in spite of your circumstances, how to win because of them, right? When I was a founder, I came across this book called Meditations by a Roman emperor called Marcus Aurelius, and he has a line in the book that really forever reframed my mindset. And the line goes something like, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way, right? So at a very early age, I think I got to witness, I got to experience everything that bedevils young Black and brown men in America, from assault to armed robbery to police brutality to gang violence, everything that we witnessed, right? And I'm lucky that I experienced those things, because that built kind of like the scar tissue around my soul, so to speak, and it hardened it to the degree where it was very hard to break. And and it just added a lot of fuel to the fire. So I say look deep within and figure out how are you going to use that to drive you forward, right? Don't try to break anyone else down. Focus on building yourself up. Don't be a victim, be a victor, right? In doing so, that'll dramatically enhance chances of success. So in the book, that's kind of the core theme that I cover, right? How I experienced the things that I experienced from day one, and I kept experiencing more. It's not like it just went away over from one day to the other. I just kept experiencing a lot of things like that, and how I turned those things into launching pads, not how I turned obstacles into launching pads for micro leaps of success. Because it wasn't like I did this and boom. No, it was actually it was just a bunch of micro leaps that led to an overnight success, so to speak.
So Annika here says, stoicism for the win. So thanks, Annika. And thanks, Larry, for the question. Great question. And here, Annika says, stoicism for the win. I love the Daily Stoic. You're very well spoken, Edrizio. Wow. So I agree, Annika. Let's pull up Annika's question then. So thanks for the question here. So the question is, Edrizio, could you explain your company and business model? So curious as an Indo-Canadian who's shooting for Princeton next year.
Yeah, so I don't have a company anymore. I sold it to MasterCard a few years ago. The initial business that I mentioned was a remittance product, right? So instead of sending cash, the consumer would pay bills abroad. So if I'm sitting here, I will pay my family's bills back in Dominican Republic or Mexico. We wound up pivoting multiple times up until we pivoted into what became the company called Arcus. We completely changed, but we kept the bill pay aspect, which what we discovered is that paying bills in Latin America was actually quite painful. And something happened in 2017, 2018, which was a lot of fintech started succeeding, and that kind of urged banks to start modernizing their apps, and everybody wanted a modern kind of bill pay solution. And in Mexico, there was no way to do it. You have to either go build your own relationships with billers and build an infrastructure from scratch. So we wound up building kind of I call it a plaid for bill pay, so to speak. You have all these kind of silo bill pay companies like electricity, gas, water, selling all tech, and we just built this elegant API layer on top of it. And if you were a fintech, you could just plug into us, and we'll give you instant access to all of them, and you could build a really modern UI that would be great for retention because everybody has to pay their bills, right? Nobody wants to be late on that. And that we just rode that wave up until 2021 when we wound up selling the company to MasterCard.
I'm going to pull some of the multiple questions we have on Twitter. But first, before we do that, tell us, a little bit more about, your book, why you wrote it, and what it's about, and why people should read it. I just want to make sure we get to that early because it's very important, and we have an apparently infinite stream of questions coming in.
Yeah, so the book is called The Underdog Founder. In stores September 19th. I talk about my journey from the time I used to sell guayabas in the streets of Santo Domingo, all the way to when I wound up selling my company to MasterCard. And I cover everything. I cover everything, man. I cover deep personal stuff that I never talked about publicly. Extraordinarily, sometimes gut-wrenching to read. Just trigger warning. But I feel that is life. Life is full of ebbs and flows. There's full of highs and full of lows, and some of those lows are tragic, and it happens. But life is not what happens to you; it's how you react to it. 90% of success is 10% of life is what happens to you. 90% is how you react to it. And if I'm blessed enough to be where I am today, I felt compelled to share my story with others because I feel like that's ultimately how you repay back for those blessings. If I don't share that story, then I feel like that's a curse. I feel like the way to repay back for the blessings that allowed me to be here today is just share the story, and hopefully motivate other people, and hopefully I inspire that kid from South side of Chicago or east side of LA or the South Bronx that feels like it's hopeless, and I want to let them know that it's actually hopeful, and this is how, in a very practical term, and that's what the book is all about.
And where can people buy it? It's on Amazon, I guess.
Yeah, Amazon and Barnes & Noble. You can go to my website right now and get the first chapter for free.
What's the website?
I'll share it later. It's Edrizio.cruz.com.
So just your.
I don't know if I can share. I don't know if I can. Yeah.
I'm
not allowed to.
Edrizio.cruz.com. I will add it to the comments. I'll also add it. Yeah. First chapter of the book. There, I added it to comments here for everybody, so they'll get it on Twitch and YouTube and LinkedIn, but not Twitter, I think. So, but I'll also add it in the description afterwards.
Awesome.
Another plug. So I'm always trying to plug things from Reed and Chris. Reed's new book is also available on actually all for free, I think, for another month on his website. If anyone wants to read a really cool book for free. Okay, I will pull one of these Twitter questions. So the question is from Oakbor Emmanuel. And the question is, how much traction does an early stage startup in Africa need for Y-Combinator to invest? And what does YC look for in a team?
That's a good question. I think it's a question I get asked for a lot. So I challenge you to reframe the question and instead of ask, what is it that I need in order to build a successful startup in order to close my seed round? Really, I think that's the right question. You don't want to attach yourself to a particular brand or a particular organization because that's kind of a losing battle. You want to attach yourself to success, right? So there's a couple of things. First of all, it starts with the team, right? So when it comes to the team, you typically want to have two co-founders, one that focuses on sales, one focuses on building the product. You want somebody that ideally that has somebody's experience in sales and the other one has experience in building product. That's what technical co-founder, CTO. The best ideas comes from personal experiences. So you want to be someone that's thought about your own problems. In my case, I talk about a lot. Like I was fixing my own problem. I grew up sending remittances and receiving remittances, and it was broken for 20 years, and I wanted to fix it. Was that the business that ultimately scaled to hundreds of millions of dollars? No, not at all. But so it doesn't really matter. All that matters is you get started with something. Start with where you are, with what you have, because what you have is already plenty. So I think a smart investor will ask to see how you relate it to the problem. And even an even smarter investor will know that ideas are irrelevant. All that matters is the team. But if you are thoughtful enough to go through that, that's better. So at a pre-seed stage, a lot of it rides on the team, not the traction. I would say is team, market, and traction. And the less you have of one, the more you got to make up with the other. So again, if you're a team that you worked at, the technical co-founder was a PM at Microsoft, and the non-technical founder was salesperson at Salesforce, then you're golden, right? Or if you worked at a startup that was Series A funded, Series B funded, and you were CTO there, or you were engineer there, that's great. Or you worked at a startup and you were the head of sales there, that's great also. So I think those two models work well. You either work at a big tech company or you worked at a Series A or Series B company. In absence of that, then you have to start figuring out like how you have more traction, right? The less your team is off that operational line, the more traction you just gotta have, right? And a great example of that, my favorite example is Airbnb, because they didn't have that at all. There were a bunch of designers from a school you never heard of, so they had to have a lot of traction. So they had to make up for their lack of pedigree with lots of traction. So that's a great example of how you can succeed in spite of not having that kind of that pedigree, so to speak. So there's ways. There's always ways, and obviously, Africa is a really hot market now. It's what Latin was like 4 or 5 years ago, Africa is now. So I think that's advantageous. At the same time, pre-seed market has stumbled like all segments. You have, I think it's like 40% less capital available now. That just have to mean you have to hustle a little bit harder, but you could do a lot more with a lot less. The barriers to entry, the barriers to launch are a lot lower now. You can build a lot with no-code tools. There's a lot of AI tools that can help you go to market quicker. And I cover a lot of these things in the book, but there's very quick and easy ways that you can launch an MVP, get some traction, get some users, and just have some talking points with investors. Use this as a way to learn and have talking points. And I think if you are able to communicate with conviction, like this is the idea, this is what we discovered, this is what we learned, these are what the problems are, and this is how I think we can fix it. I think if you can do that elegantly and professionally, I think that should be good enough to raise a pre-seed round. Sorry that it took so long.
Okay, so we have a question here from Tessin. His question is, what lessons did you take from Wall Street, and how did you apply them to building your startup? So thank you for the question, Tessin. And Edrizio, what lessons did you take from Wall Street?
I'll tell you both sides. So both things that I learned and both things I had to unlearn. The things that I learned that were fruitful in my journey was just being analytical, being very meticulous about how I present, how I analyze things, how I think through opportunities financially, mechanically, analytically, how I think about like markets. Because I became very good at financial modeling, it was easy to me to spin up a financial model like in hours or something like that. So I could think about like, okay, this is the path towards like going from $0 to $100 million, and just being very sharp as a presenter, right? Wall Street, especially as a banker, that's all you do day in, day out. At the same time, I had to unlearn a lot of things. So with Wall Street, especially a place like JP Morgan, which is the biggest bank in the world, you're sitting on an ivory tower. You're not getting your hands dirty. You're sitting in an ivory tower in Park Avenue, where everything's fine and dandy, and you can talk to CEOs and tell them about the market and sound fancy. That's not the real world at all. So it kind of does a disservice, because you're riding in this kind of a mega cruise ship, when building a startup is like riding like a yola, like a little tiny boat, with no motor, right? Where you feel every single wave. And so when the wave really high, like you better be ready. So I had to unlearn. The first thing I had to unlearn is that this whole concept of like doing things only when they're perfect, or doing things by consensus, or always asking for permission. I had to completely unlearn that process. I had to learn that speed is the name of the game with startups. I had to learn that the currency is learning, not necessarily results, revenue, or even users. It's just learning. How am I learning this week over week over week over week? I had to learn how to value just again, speed. Speed is the name of the game. How quickly can you move from one iteration to the other? Whereas in banking, the name of the game is all about like, being compliant and being analytical and reaching consensus with your team. And the kind of big companies mentality really does you a disservice to a point. So it's not good to spend too many years in big companies, because then that transition to startup world, it's like it's like, it's sort of like living in like Russia for a number of years and then like wanting to live like, I don't know, in Japan afterwards. It's like it's going to be a major culture shock, right? Because you're being indoctrinated into like one way of thinking, which is completely opposite into another way. So that's why it's you need just enough of big corporate.
I assume that also, like your business was a B2B business in the end. The
Yeah,
one
B2B
that,
enterprise at the end. Yeah.
and you did a lot of work, even for the first one that was more consumer. Presumably you had like bank partnerships and stuff like that. Do you feel that having worked in a big bank or any big corporate kind of like made it easier for you to understand the mentality of those enterprises and understand how to work with them in a way that you wouldn't have otherwise?
Yeah, it definitely gave me insight. It definitely gave me some insights. It definitely gave me the pedigree. It definitely made people feel more comfortable with taking a bet on me because I had gone through all these environments of excellence. Like I said before, I think a lot of the bet early on is on you. So you want to, working where you work is a signal for how good you are. That's what it is, right? People like you gotta understand that the investor's point of view is like there's so much information asymmetry. Like they don't know what they're investing in at the early stage. They're really investing in you, and they don't even know you, right? So where you work is a signal for that. And I think that helped me a lot.
Yeah, interesting. All right. So here, Anchor. So thank you, Anchor, for the question. He asks, how should I go about building, leading, and scaling a successful team, especially in the early stages of a startup?
Well, again, I challenge you to reframe that question. I think the right question is, how do I build a product that people want? And as you're doing that, you are building a team. So solve a problem for people first, and then you can think about building a team. If you don't solve a problem for someone, no one cares how big your team is, right? And I think that's the mindset that I talk a lot about that in the book. Is like, how I failed because one of the reasons I failed early on is because I wound up raising $3 million from like all these fancy investors, and I thought I had all the answers. I wound up building a pretty sizable team, only to have the business kind of blow up right in my face, and I had to like cut the team in half, including my own brother, right? So, at YC, we always say, build something people want, especially the slogan. Give people T-shirts that say "build people something want," because that's where you start. And again, like luckily, even though capital is more constrained now, the tools are a lot better. Like you can build a lot with no-code tools. You can go on Bubble and you can build like a pretty good functional e-commerce website. You can start transacting with Stripe very easily. I remember when we were setting up on Stripe, and my support person was? It was John Collison. He was my support person when I was like, hey, John, this ain't working, and he would respond right away. So and now the guy's a billionaire now. So it's just like it's like we didn't have a lot of these tools back when I started. Like a lot of it was kind of makeshift. Now a lot of things are kind of like on the go and turnkey solutions. So yes, so you can be a non-technical solo founder, and you can build solutions very quickly. It's all about taking like the right approach, talking to customers, launching a beta version, getting it out, and repeat.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk a lot about no-code tools, and I've personally been spending a lot of time with that. I think it's I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm getting the wrong impression, but I feel no one's talking, or too few people are talking about the power of no-code tools, because they really do empower anybody to build anything really quickly. I'm kind of like testing out a business idea, and it took me, I think, a day and a half to build, a product that looks professional.
Wow.
I used Webflow as my front end. It's like a web app.
Yeah. They were in my batch in 2013.
Yeah, that's it. So I use like Figma to like design it. It's super quick and so much easier than the things you would use before. I used Webflow for the front end and Firebase for the back end. And it took me a day and a half. I mean, I spent half a day of research, then took me a day and a half to build. And, I did that on my own. Like, it definitely was not like that when I started my last business 4 years ago. Like, it wasn't like that.
There you go.
Completely different.
That's a perfect case study, man. That's a great. I mean, you just talked about your stack in a very simplistic way, easy to use tools.
Yeah,
that's excellent, man.
Another experience I had recently. So I had this high school kid who reached out to me. He's like, "Hey, can I be an intern for you?" I was like, "Yeah, let's try it out." And I want you to, build a list of people, and you'll have to like copy stuff from the internet, right? And what I want you to do is create a Chrome extension that will make it easier for you to copy the specific data that you're copying. So it does like some of the processing and stuff like that. And I was like, here's what the Chrome extension should do. Go ask ChatGPT how to build it. And this like 16-year-old kid who'd never built anything was able to, cut out like 3/4 of the work by asking ChatGPT how to build a Chrome extension.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah.
Holy crap, man. I will try that as soon as we get off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So it's kind of like a combination of like, I don't consider myself a software developer anymore. That was my job for 5 years, but I haven't, I built the first version of every business that I've built. And that's about all the, engineering or development or programming that I've done in the last 10 years. But, I'm familiar enough to give people instructions. And I really think the combination of having a knowledgeable developer and existing tools, kind of like being guided. So like this guy, he wouldn't even have thought that, hey, building a Chrome extension would be the right way. Like, doesn't have like the kind of like architectural knowledge, let's say.
Yeah.
But with a combination of like me giving him guidance and then ChatGPT giving him instructions, like he was able to just automate himself, which is quite impressive.
That's amazing. Congrats, man. That's when you do that podcast, let me know because I want to tune in.
It's pretty interesting. Like, and I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. Like because I'm heading into starting a new business, and I think my perspective now is it's a bit aligned with what you're saying. It's just like you can do more with less people and people with less technical experience. So it's kind of like you can get younger people who are like more hungry, and you can have less of them, and they can just get more done.
Yeah.
And especially the early stages of the business, like there's not much point in having like maybe the kind of like model is the kind of like Instagram model where it's like they were 6 people until they sold to Facebook.
Yeah.
And maybe that model like is more appropriate for more businesses now than it used to be. Anyways, that's something I've been kind of thinking about a lot and talking to my wife about a lot. I don't know what you feel about that.
No, I agree. I think AI is a huge multiplier effect. It's the single biggest point of leverage for tech since the advent of like, I think the cloud. I think it'll lower the barriers to entry that much, lower the cost significantly. It'll dramatically open up the doors for a lot of people that were not necessarily able to build MVPs in a quicker fashion. And it'll let developers kind of code faster, develop products faster, iterate quicker. Man, it's just we're at the precipice of something massive. It's really exciting stuff.
Yeah, I'm really finding that a lot of developers aren't leaning into this stuff enough. Like people my age, essentially. Like I'm 34. So it's like we are too kind of like used to doing things in the old way. And when I talk to like younger people, I think most of them have been kind of like indoctrinated to how people my age think, and they're approaching things the wrong way. But maybe like 25% of people, they like who are 18 in college now, like they're just like not part of my world, and they just like operate in a totally different way that's 10x more efficient.
Yeah.
For example, what I was saying, it's like I'm going to scrape data from the internet. I'll just ask ChatGPT how to do it, and then that's just amazing to me.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. It's a different mindset.
So we're kind of at the end of our time. We have a bunch of questions rolling in and questions left on Twitter. But maybe the right thing is to give people a way to find you online so that they can get more knowledge from you that way. Or I don't know if you want people to contact you directly and you want to share that, but like where can people find you? How can they contact you? What are the
Sure,
links and addresses people should know?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn. There's only one Edrizio on LinkedIn, so that's easy. And besides that, you can sign up on our website, edrizios.cruz.com. Not only you get access to the book, you also get access to a newsletter where I share startup advice that doesn't suck. So yeah, it's easy to reach.
And I assume Twitter too, where your Twitter handle is just your name, Edrizio Cruz.
Edrizio Cruz. It's only one Edrizio there too. So yeah, I always put out content on just kind of advice that I wish I had when I was younger, and all centered around what I wound up writing about in the book.
So I'll wrap this up. So thank you to everybody who joined and asked questions. It was really great to get all these questions, and I'm sorry we didn't get through all of them. Thank you to our team, Shalok, Brendan, and Jeremy for setting everything up. And Edrizio, how do you pronounce your colleague's name?
Yuli.
Ritza?
Yeah, Yulitza.
Right?
Yeah, she's great.
So thank you to Edrizio's colleague Yulitza for helping set this up, and Edrizio, thank you, for coming on and contributing so much, insightful information.
Awesome, man. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye, everyone. Cheers.